All right, so welcome to Plant-Based Farm. I'm Nicole, I'm a pharmacist, and the whole idea of this is just to introduce general health and wellness topics. So tonight we are talking to Lauren Morris. The topic tonight is the benefits and application of a gluten-free diet. Lauren is a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And she was diagnosed with celiac in 2010, and she's been gluten-free ever since. So she's a 10-year expert on everything gluten. Welcome, Lauren. Thank you for joining us. And if you want to do more of an introduction than what I did, or run over what you want to cover, that would be great.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks for doing this program too. It's so cool having your perspective as somebody that knows all about the pharmacy side, but also you personally embody the holistic side so beautifully. And so it's really, I'm excited to see the direction you take this. So I have been, I've been gluten-free for 10 years, like Nicole said. I'm just gonna talk about kind of generally what is gluten, what foods it's in, who might benefit, and kind of how to do a gluten-free diet. So like Nicole said, I've been gluten-free for 10 years. I was diagnosed with celiac disease. I actually kind of had to ask the diagnosis myself. So I'd been having low-grade digestive symptoms for a few years, and I talked to a doctor, and it was kind of like, well, you know, it's not very severe. It's kind of just normal for you, I guess, and kind of was just like brushed it off. And so, and I wasn't having like any severe symptoms. So I started acupuncture school. And I started to really understand that if you're having symptoms, something is wrong. And so it's better to listen to the whisper before it turns into a scream. So a friend suggested that it might be a gluten issue that I was having. And so I asked for the blood work, and they did it, and it came back positive. And then I had endoscopy where they put a scope in your small intestine, and that confirmed so I was having ulcers in my small intestine. And so what celiac disease does is the gluten destroys the cilia in your small intestine, which are the little hair-like structures that actually is where your body absorbs nutrition. So people that are gluten-free tend to, or people that have celiac disease tend to have a hard time absorbing nutrition and that sort of thing. That can lead to a lot of other issues. So what gluten is exactly, it's a protein that's found in wheat, barley, malt, and rye. So anything that's like all your breads, crackers, pasta, beer, it's kind of sneaky. It's in a lot of different things. It's used as a binding agent because it's kind of like a sticky protein that holds things together. And so it ends up in a lot of different weird kind of places. So gluten it was genetically modified in the 70s, and that's likely why it's so inflammatory and it bothers people so much. And it is one of the most inflammatory foods. So kind of the big trigger foods people have is gluten, corn, soy, dairy, and then a lot of times eggs bothers people too. So if you're having a lot of symptoms like inflammatory symptoms, redness, skin issues, joint pain, muscle pain, brain fog is a really big one that tends to be a gluten kind of sign. And then also like allergies, that sort of thing. So that might be a good starting point as far as going gluten-free to see if that helps your symptoms. Some of the benefits is it's anti-inflammatory, and it can be good for just kind of helping to reset your body a little bit if you're in that state of inflammation and that sort of thing. So something I want to talk about too is the fact that gluten-free is not necessarily healthy. So there's a lot of, like when I went gluten-free, I actually gained some weight initially because I wasn't paying attention to what I was eating, and I was really just focusing on only eating gluten-free foods. And there's a lot of gluten-free junk food out there. So if you're eating, gluten-free crackers and gluten-free bread, it's still just processed, refined potato starch or rice starch or that sort of thing. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that gluten-free equals healthy. It's still refined, processed sugar, whatever. It's just doesn't contain actual gluten. So if you have celiac disease, then it's good for you, or if you have a gluten issue, it's good for you. Something else is you can have a gluten you can be sensitive to gluten and not have celiac disease. So I have friends that are not celiac, but they are a lot more reactive to gluten than I am. So even if you test negative for celiac, you still certainly can be, you can still benefit from a gluten-free diet. So if you decide that you do want to try gluten-free, let's say you are having psoriasis or eczema or brain fog or really severe fatigue, digestive issues, I would suggest going gluten-free really strictly for 6 weeks, and not cheating a little bit, not doing mostly gluten-free, but just completely eliminating it and then seeing how you feel after those 6 weeks. So I noticed when I went gluten-free, I cheated a few times and I noticed a huge difference. Really bloated, tired, kind of crabby, and I kind of got a little bit shaky too, and definitely the brain fog was a thing. So if you want to see if it works for you, you can do nutritional testing. Like there's the Cyrex labs and they draw your blood and they test it and see what bothers you. That's one option. It's kind of expensive. So if you do want to just kind of do an elimination diet, that's a really good place to start. Other food triggers, like I mentioned, is the dairy, corn, and soy. So if you're having a lot of issues, especially autoimmune issues, that's a good place to start with just eliminating those big triggers and then slowly adding them back in and seeing what's really bothering you. Some sneaky gluten to watch out for. One of them is malt. So you'll see it a lot in like Rice Krispies. It has malt flavoring. So Rice Krispies aren't gluten-free, even though they're just rice. Also with the malt, like malt beverages, like wine coolers, Mike's Hard Lemonade, like the hard root beers, like that kind of stuff, be really careful of because that's another kind of sneaky gluten place. Even like malt vinegar, that sort of thing. Soy sauce is probably one of the biggest um, sneaky gluten things because everything's flavored with soy sauce, like beef sticks, certain chips, a lot of Asian food just has it kind of in the sauce or in the marinade. So be really careful of soy sauce because it is made with wheat, which is really annoying. Also, oats are another one. So oats are actually gluten-free. They don't contain gluten themselves, but they're processed on the equipment that wheat is also processed on, and they're roughly the same size. So almost all oats that you get have some gluten in them. So you can get gluten-free oats or steel cut oats. They're manufactured on different equipment. So those are safe.
I have a question regarding that. So would you say that people have different levels of sensitivity then? So like somebody might still have a reaction to like the oats processed on that, but someone else might not even notice?
Yeah, definitely. I think that if you are gluten-free and if you don't notice, you're still creating chronic inflammation in your body. So it's better if you don't. Like I know somebody that is gluten sensitive and he just gets like sinus drainage and kind of like a runny, drippy nose. For him, it's worth it to have a piece of bread every now and then or pizza every now and then because you just kind of have to balance symptoms versus quality of life and what's really important to you. But you are creating a systemic inflammation in your body that maybe that runny nose isn't bothering you, but what are you doing to your gut? And that's a big thing with the gluten is it really damages your gut. And that's kind of the foundation of all of your health because if you're not absorbing your nutrients or if you have leaky gut and your intestinal permeability, you're having foods getting into your bloodstream and that's creating other problems down the road. So yeah, definitely people have different levels. And it's a quality of life. Maybe it is really important to you to have sushi every now and then or whatever, but yeah. Another thing is soups. They almost always have gluten because they are made with like a roux typically. So I never eat soup unless it's explicitly gluten-free because it usually is sneaking in there. Same with like cream of something soup. So sorry, hot dish fans, that's usually out as well. um, Beer, obviously. Couscous. So couscous, it's like the Mediterranean. It's like little balls. It kind of looks like quinoa, and quinoa is okay, but couscous is not. So that's kind of it can be a sneaky, confusing one as well. So really, it's just, with all things, the best diet you can do is just whole food. Instead of buying sweet potato chips, buy a sweet potato and just kind of eat as label free or as little of a label as you can is really the best way to go about a diet. So yeah, that was my gluten spiel.
So I had heard before, sorry, I have to do this on my phone and it's a little goofy. I guess I had heard in the past, like if you were someone who wants to go gluten-free, that after you do that and then you add the gluten back in, you would be more sensitive, or like you could basically make it worse, like make yourself more
Mm,
sensitive to the gluten. And I feel like you kind of covered that. It's like if you eliminate it and like start to decrease that inflammation, and sort of
mhm.
your body starts to kind of repair itself, and then you add a toxin back in, it's going to like be exponential in terms of like the inflammation and the symptoms that you're experiencing. Does that kind of wrap that in a nutshell, do you feel like? Or
Yeah, I agree. And I think once too you start to feel better, like I don't think we realize how crappy we feel sometimes until we start to feel better.
right.
And then we go feeling good and we're like, oh, I can't think. I left my phone at home 3 days this week, silly things like that. We become a lot more noticeable.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When you have been feeling like kind of crappy for so long, and it can
Hmm.
then you don't realize like what state your body is actually in. I feel like I've experienced that in pregnancy. It was like, oh, I feel kind of crappy, and then it just kind of kept getting worse, but I didn't really realize it until the baby was out. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I feel amazing.
Yep, definitely.
um
Yeah.
so um those sneaky things that get into the food, I feel like that's a real issue, because I think it's really difficult for people to identify them. So
Mhm.
I mean, you definitely pointed out a lot of things that we might not think about, or things to look for, but is there a good resource in like where someone could find a list or something like that you know of? Or
Not top of my head, but just from doing a quick Google search, there's quite a
Mhm.
few websites and they break it down. I mean, some people get really crazy with it. Like I was talking to somebody and I was actually the chiropractor I work with, and he was telling me about, I think they call them like the gluten Nazis or something like that, or something, but they get like really intense about finding gluten everywhere to the point where it's like, um, they advise they advise having your husband brush his teeth before you kiss him because he might have remaining gluten in his mouth. And so it's like it kind of comes back to that balance of what stress does to your body and what being really intense about being stressed and focused and hypervigilant and kind of being afraid of everything. I think that can also have a negative impact, and just having the right balance between the two, where you're reading your labels, you're paying attention, but you're also not living in this constant state of like gluten fear, if that makes sense. But then again, some people are so sensitive that they'll have the tiniest cross contamination and be in bed for 2 days. So it probably depends too on your level of severity.
Right. And like from a pharmacy perspective too, like certain like medications can be made with gluten. So that's something
Hmm.
I will have people check on once in a while is, does my medication have gluten in it? And it's actually not super easy to figure out. You usually have to call the manufacturer and ask them. It will be in the package insert with the inactive ingredients, but again, a lot of people like, I don't necessarily know all of the tiny little things that gluten could be hiding in. So,
Yeah.
and with generics, there's lots of different manufacturers. So you have to look at like which manufacturer you have and then figure out if there's gluten in it. And, that applies to like over the counter medications and supplements as well. Our
Hmm.
carrying some higher quality supplements, and they're a lot of them are they're like gluten free, like cutler free or dye free and stuff like that. So it's
Hmm.
definitely something people are thinking about more now.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. And yeah, those prescription, I mean, you get the handout with it, and it's like, I mean, it's like so much information on a little piece of paper. I don't think I've ever actually read that.
Yeah.
And
Most people don't want
yeah, it's not like easy reading.
to.
And there's a thyroid medication too that has gluten. I forget which one. Um,
Okay. Yeah, I
I think
mean,
it's, I think it might be, it's not Synthroid. Um, I think it might be Levo has gluten, which is,
okay.
for especially with thyroid issues, especially Hashimoto's, gluten is like being gluten free is as important as being gluten free for celiac because of the way the autoimmune responds and the way it's like, I guess the the molecule of gluten is really similar to makeup as your thyroid. And so when you do get that gluten exposure, your body releases the antibodies to kill the gluten and then also damage. So that's something that I know the chiropractor and I work with, we watch out for with our Hashimoto's patients and that sort of thing.
That's
Yeah,
good.
it's interesting.
Um,
Yeah.
let's see. Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk about is like you kind of mentioned some symptoms, I guess, of why you might suspect that you would be gluten intolerant or have celiac. So obviously, like digestion issues or bloating, or
Mm-hmm.
would you say like constipation or diarrhea too? Just
Yeah, I think typically more it's like loose stools, that type of thing.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, but then again, if you have this chronic inflammation in your gut, you can have this inflammation in your body that causes other things downstream. So like autoimmune diseases, um, or like I think you also mentioned skin issues is another big one. So I think that's
Mm-hmm.
just something that a lot of people are not aware of, that you think you have a skin issue, it's because of a skin issue, not because of a gut issue.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
so
it's
that would
interesting
definitely,
the way it presents in your body.
yeah. And you
Yeah.
also mentioned the brain fog. I just had it right now. So, uh, so brain fog is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. You feel foggy minded, kind of confused, maybe a little like drowsy, or like you're searching for the words or the thoughts, but you can't really find them. And that can be related to a lot of things, but it is good to know that it could just be like a diet issue.
Definitely. Yeah, brain fog is one that I see quite a bit, especially when you kind of get those people that have a lot of really funky symptoms going on, and there's just kind of that like autoimmune storm type person. The brain
Mhm.
fogs are a big one, and gluten is a really good place to start for that. I've even found research for a patient I'm treating for Parkinson's, and they've seen that gluten-free diet has a positive outcome on Parkinson's patients. So there definitely is a strong brain connection with that as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of the brain gut connection too. So
Hmm.
again, you think it's just in your brain, but it could have a lot to do with what you're eating and what's getting into your system that way.
Yeah, and they say your gut is your second brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a newer thing. Definitely people haven't been talking about that for very long, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, I forgot what it was. I should have reread on it, but something with the like your neuroreceptors, actually quite a few of them are made in your gut system, and different chemical releases that happen in your brain are originating from your gut. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Even the emotional side of your gut health. Like I remember reading a study about mice that they did transplants, like gut biome transplants in the mice, and it affected their cognitive skills based on their gut biome. So interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
there's like serotonin is a big neurotransmitter that we think of in our brains. And so like a lot of depression medications are related to serotonin, but serotonin is also made in your gut. So um,
Hmm.
that's another kind of link.
Yeah. So if
Um,
your gut's hyper inflamed and angry, you're probably not going to feel very good emotionally.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I know you said like you would suggest doing like a 6-week elimination if you wanted to kind of test it out. Do you think that it would be beneficial? I mean, just from your like personal opinion, do you think it would be beneficial if someone was willing to just try it for like a week or two? Do you think that that would be helpful, or do you think you kind of need 6 weeks to figure it out?
It might be helpful, but I don't think that you can say, nope, gluten free isn't the solution after 2 weeks. I don't think you can really write it off and kind of close that door. But,
Mm-hmm.
if you can only really commit to 2 weeks, then yeah, try it and see how you feel. Maybe you will feel better. It takes a while for your gut lining to really kind of heal itself. And that's why I think the 6 weeks is kind of that magic number. But you might notice sooner, so it won't hurt.
Yeah, I guess you maybe could notice if you were feeling a little better.
Hmm.
Some issues like autoimmune issues or skin issues, I would imagine would take a little bit of time to clear up if that was what was triggering them. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think so too.
Weeks sounds like a long time, but I guess, you know, if you are in a position where you're kind of like desperate or really like really willing to work on it, it would be really beneficial.
Yeah, and being gluten-free is surprisingly easy. I mean, I think it's the easiest thing to cut out, like one of the easiest things to cut out because so many places have gluten-free options. Like even Culver's has a gluten-free bun that's really good. So kind of back to the whole like gluten-free isn't necessarily healthy thing. Like it's like, oh, I'm being healthy, having my, butter burger with gluten-free bun. But if you're in a pinch and you're out, there's a lot of options. Like most pizza places have gluten-free pizzas and that sort of thing. So it's really not that bad if you really commit to it. But being halfway in, halfway out, I think is that it creates some decision fatigue. But if you really just decide this is what it's going to be, it's not that bad.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. I was gonna ask you if it was like really hard when you first started, you know, and maybe I guess it was then, but I'm glad that you brought up that it's not that hard, like going to restaurants and stuff like that. I think there's a lot more awareness now, so you definitely see gluten-free options.
Hmm.
Um, but and it probably also makes you more likely to choose healthier options too. I mean, not the butter burger, like you
Yeah,
said, but I mean, you might choose like a salad over, you know, fried chicken
right.
or something.
Yeah, it definitely keeps from eating too many like fried things. It's not really an option. Um, yeah, that's something else I'll say, but I forgot. Brain fog, I guess, for me too.
It happens.
Yeah.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Leah, you are unmuted. You never did mute yourself, I think,
No,
but
I just stayed very quiet.
you did a good job.
I
Do
actually, I was hoping Hannah would join us, but I know like she's worried about her skin and wondering if like she needs to cut out dairy or she needs to like she's always tried to like figure it out, I guess. If it's stress related, if it, you know what I mean? And I know one of the things she was, kind of wondering about was gluten. Like maybe I should, but if she's thinking it could be, lactose, gluten, stress, like all of these different things, like if she cut them all out at the same time, it seems like she would be living on water.
Oh.
So would you advise, like if she wanted to find out if that's what bothers her skin, if if like would you suggest that gluten would be the first thing she should maybe work on, or like cut out or try, and like Nicole said, like maybe even just for a couple weeks? Or is that
Mhm.
something that you'd go, maybe dairy, or maybe stress, or maybe, you know what I mean? Is there like a first, when it comes to our
Mhm.
skin, um would you say like there's a first thing you should go to?
I think with skin, dairy is usually my first go-to.
Okay.
And I would say also, you mentioned lactose.
Hmm.
Lactose is one part of it, but it can also be casein, which is a protein in dairy. There's a lot of different parts of dairy that can be triggers and reactive. So sometimes I'll be like, suggest a patient goes dairy free and they buy lactose free milk, and that's not really going to cut it, So
Okay.
um, cut out all dairy. And she can, I mean, I think dairy is a lot harder to cut out than gluten because there's not really any good dairy substitutes. Like dairy-free cheese isn't a thing. I mean, there's not really,
Oh,
and nut milks are fine, but it's harder, I think. So I would probably have her start with dairy and maybe go from there, and probably gluten be the second one. Eggs can be kind of a trigger for skin sometimes too, and kind of back to that whole gut thing.
okay.
So I think eggs are great and really healthy, but if you're already having gut issues and some of that like intestinal permeability or kind of that leaky gut stuff going on,
Yeah.
eggs have the whites of them. It's called lectin. That's a protein in there, and they tend to be really sticky and kind of help like be like little backpacks for other food to kind of cross over that barrier and cause more inflammation. So
Oh.
a lot of times if you're having gut issues or autoimmune issues, you want to cut out eggs until you kind of get things back on track, and then you can add them back in later, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had just been reading that gluten and dairy were probably like the most common things that would trigger just general issues such as skin issues. So
Mhm.
the whole brain fog to me, like listening to all the brain fog talk, I was just like, I hope I can just blame genetics because I don't want to cut stuff out. Like I keep thinking like you're saying it's not as hard as you'd think, but I'm just like, geez, I have to cut out things that I love. I'm like, I think I'd rather have like brain fog.
It's all a give and take. It's what's important to you.
Yeah, that's what she was talking about, quality of life. So, I mean, if it's like, and that's the thing, if it's like, oh, let's cut out caffeine and you love coffee, it's like, I think I'd rather it. I mean,
The thing is, in our reality though, especially as we age, like memory is something that is actually a scary thing to lose. When you start realizing how much you forget things. And I guess, I mean, I'm not 50 yet, but I'm getting there. And the way I look at it is, I guess I'd rather cut out something like gluten if I needed to than sit there and worry that, I mean, oh my gosh, I have dementia. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, I mean, it'd be nice to know if that's something that can prolong our memories or, our health, because there are crazy things in our foods that we eat that we think are healthy.
right. And I think that, generally we just want to be healthy. And I think from my perspective, again, in the pharmacy, when I see, I'll see someone just start like one medication and then it's something else and then they get another condition. And just like we were kind of talking about with gut health, if you have this inflammatory, if your body is in a constant state of inflammation and you're getting all these toxins and things into your system and developing autoimmune disease and such, it's like, wouldn't you have rather caught it way back when than having to deal with actual memory problems later, or diabetes, and now you're on insulin and you're like, oh crap, I wish I would have thought more about my diet 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder if because I caught my celiac so early, if that's why I'm not hyper reactive like some gluten-free people are, where they'll just be laid out in bed sick for days, whereas I kind of caught it when it was still that little whisper. And so now if I do, oops, I had some sushi. Oh, also another thing, artificial crab meat has gluten, which is super annoying because I love sushi. So sushi's a hard one, not just because of the soy sauce, but because of the artificial crab as well as tempura. But let's say, oops, I ate some sushi. I'm like, oh, I'm bloated and tired and like kind of crabby today, but I'm not like, it's not that big of a deal either. So there definitely is something to be said for, like you're saying, Nicole, really paying attention and what can I do to save myself a lot of pain down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Anything else, Lauren?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. I think that, we'll probably think of more things later on that we want to talk about. We'll definitely do something with acupuncture.
Yeah,
Maybe
it'd be fun.
different topics.
Yeah.
But
it's fun to switch it up and talk about something other than acupuncture.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing your experience with us and all those great tips. And I'm sure there will be more questions later on, so we'll reach out to you if we need some more help.
Cool. Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much, you guys.
All right. Bye.
Bye.